Good morning, everybody. I'm watching all kinds of movies right now. Lisa and I get ready. We always try to watch all the movies on the Oscars, before the Oscars. So I'm judging that video on so many, cinematography notes, etc. Man, love it. I'm excited. Wish somebody else was preaching this morning after that. But I want to welcome you today, and we're trying to, again, welcome to anybody that's watching at home online. A lot of people I've talked to this week are sick. I even hear a few coughs today. And I'm muffling my own behind the curtain there today. So hopefully we'll all kind of heal up this winter. And I couldn't be more excited about diving into this little book. It's a short book, and I don't know how many of you have ever even read the book of Jonah. It's often relegated to a children's story. And you see why. There's like a cool big fish in it, which is exciting for kids. So it's a popular one for kids. It just lends itself to the flannel graph. It lends itself to puppets. It lends itself to engaging kids with sort of a built-in excitement. The danger of that is familiarity can breed, they say contempt. I think it's more likely that it can breed apathy, that we can easily become apathetic about things that we know or maybe that we think we know. So I've been reading this the last few weeks, and I'm seeing things in it that I've never seen before. And I hope for you, if you're a veteran, you might experience that. You say, I've read it, but I hope you'll get it fresh. Some of you, what I'm really, really pumped about is this might be the first time you've ever even looked at this book, this Old Testament book of Jonah, century years old, and it is as relevant and fresh for us today as anything I can think of. In a moment, once we see how the first chapter unfolds, rather than reading it all, I'm going to kind of read it, talk about it, read it, talk about it, go through it with you together. I want you to notice how the theme of running away is big, and you can relate to that, right? Lisa and I have an ongoing debate. She goes, how come anything with you, Greg, if it involves a cell phone, an iPad, a laptop, is an immediate front burner issue? If it involves our washer that isn't working right, not so much. If it involves the garage that we've been trying to organize for, I don't know, how many months, 5.5 years, why aren't you on that with the same level of excitement? She indicts me, she busts me, she's absolutely right, she knows me all too well. And when it comes to doctor's appointments, man, I run like the wind. Not a regular doctor's appointment. I see a cardiologist once a year because that's something they check out year to year, and I just had one that went fine. I was glad about that. But man, the dentist, the eye doctor, I was getting my eyes checked shortly before Christmas because I was having kind of a weird thing going on. So I went over to one of those places just in the mall, and I go in, and there's this young girl who's just as tiny as a little thing. It was funny when she was walking me back, and I thought, my word, I looked like the Jolly Green Giant behind her. She was probably no more than 80 pounds or so. And she tells me to sit down, and I'm doing great until you put your chin. Wow, so I hear you identifying with me. Thank you. Honestly, talking about it, I'm not making this up, I feel clammy. I put my chin in the sensory deprivation chamber, whatever it is they're setting up for. And she goes, okay, this will just be really quick. And I had to tell her, she noticed that I was breaking out in hives, waiting for that puff of air to hit my eyeball. And that has kept me for years. Is that a glaucoma? Is that what that is? A glaucoma. And other people, like my kids do it, like, hey, that was cool. And I do it like, yeah, it is cool. And I'm almost crying as my chin is strapped in this thing. So I run away from the eye doctor as much as I can. And the dentist, and most dentists are nice, but they like drill and just awful. I suppose some of them might even be Christians, but I don't even know. It's a strange profession to go into for whatever reason. So you could probably relate to running, right? And we tend to run from things that are too overwhelming, they're too daunting, and we feel that they're gonna do us in. And that's a great way to start in this book. Next week, I'm going to get a little more into when this happened, etc., because it becomes more relevant. Next week, we'll get into chapter 2 and especially chapter 3. There's some really cool things that we'll consider that were happening at this part of the world in this history and time that set the stage well. So today, I just want you to meet our main human character, Jonah. And let me just start right off. Now, the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, the word of the Lord came to him. Now, that tells us who Jonah is. That's a common phrase in Old Testament scriptures. which was the precious possession of the nation of Israel. God spoke to them through this written medium that we now call the Old Testament. And Jonah is a prophet. He is a prophet. Now, there's a question that surrounds the book of Jonah. Was he a real historical figure, or is this a parable? Again, I'm going to get into that a little more next week and the week after. Today, I want to at least say it seems to be no doubt that this is a real dude. In another Old Testament book, the book of 2 Kings, you'll notice how he is described. In the 15th year of Amaziah, the son of Joash, king of Judah, Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel, began to reign in Samaria, and he reigned for 41 years. And then you will notice what it says. He restored, this king, the border of Israel, according to the word of the Lord. So there it is again. A word comes to someone. Now, who does it come to here? Which he spoke by his servant Jonah, the son of Amittai. We just saw that, right? The prophet. When I hear prophet today, I think fortune teller, soothsayer. I don't know if anybody's seen the Amazon Prime, The Marvelous Miss Maisel. Lisa and I have been watching that the last couple of weeks and been enjoying it. And one of the main characters kind of has this secret life where she goes to this little New York City fortune teller to find out all of her life secrets and how they will unfold. That's the way we tend to think about prophets. We think Nostradamus, we think Mayan calendars. That is not the way the prophets served in ancient Israel. The prophets in ancient Israel they're kind of like megaphones. They're almost human iPhones. They have messages that are sent to those God wants to speak to. They are couriers. They're FedEx delivery drivers, if you will, that have something that comes from God. Notice, the word of the Lord comes to his servant Jonah. That's what sets up this story. Jonah is a prophet who is a messenger boy who is supposed to take whatever is delivered on his doorstep and get it to the audience that God intends it to go to, which is where we get into our story. Notice the next verse in Jonah. God says to him, "Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, for their evil has come up before me." This city of Nineveh, which again, I'm not going to say too much about today, that we'll get there in our story. It's very natural progression when we get there. The city of Nineveh is far outside of God's nation, Israel. And in the city of Nineveh, we find that they had no interest in the God of Israel. They had no interest in the people of God, the people of Israel. They couldn't care less. In fact, they were enemies. There was warfare between these two nations. It's some considerable distance away. And God says, I want you to go to Nineveh because their evil has come up before me. Now that phrase, to anybody living in Jonah's world, was familiar. It was a phrase that captures one of the most famous beatdowns of a city in the ancient world. Two cities, really, the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. Go back to the first book of the Bible, the book of Genesis. You'll see, then the Lord said, because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, I will go down. This is God saying, I'm going to pay these cities a personal visit. Why? Because the outcry has come to me. There's a lot of horrible things happening in Sodom and Gomorrah, and God is going to pay them a visit. So God tells his prophet, his messenger boy Jonah, I want you to go to Nineveh, for the outcry of their evil, is the implication, has come up before me. Now, I don't know about you. You get to go, if you believe in God, you believe in his protection, you believe that you are his emissary, you believe that you carry all the deputized authority that he doles out to his servants, and you get to go and rail. If I knew that I could go to Yankee Stadium and have like a force field of protection, that'd be a nice day. I'd have a good day. I'd take my buddy Scott with me to that one. Get you in that force field, and we'd wear Orioles garb, right? If I had that guarantee of protection. If I didn't, I wouldn't go. But Jonah certainly is in the employ of God. He's been used of God before, we've seen that, and he's given this mission to go and speak to this nation. Of course, some of you that know the story may, of course, know what happens. Let's follow along in the 3rd verse of Jonah 1. But Jonah rose to flee to Tarshish. Now, if you know nothing about geography, you probably know that Tarshish is not the city he told him to go to, right? He told him to go to Nineveh. But Joseph flees, and he's going to go to Tarshish, And here's the key. From the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. Notice the next sentence in the story. So he paid the fare and he went down into it to go with them to Tarshish. He went down into the ship. Basically pays his way on a seafaring vessel, and he's going to get as far away as he can. But notice the phrase, we'll come to this in a second time now. This is not a question of geography, but relationship. He wants to get away from the presence of the Lord. That's going to become a very funny, sarcastic truth in just a quick moment. I know you woke up today saying, I hope Greg shows a map. Right? I mean, that'll get you out of bed on a Sunday morning. Hope I get to see a map. I got one for you. I got a map. Jonah runs. I just want you to see this. It's pretty simple if you look. He's got to go up to Nineveh. You know, he's down here in Israel. So he says, I think I'm going to go to Tarshish, which is ancient Spain. I mean, it is, for his known world, about as far away as anybody can get as possible. And Jonah is going to do that. So he's going to make a quick stop to Joppa, right down on 152, and then he's going to hop in a seafaring vessel and head on out to ancient Spain. Wow. Now, one thing that I hope stands out to you today, I want you to see, this is something that I tried to phrase this week. But how would I capture this for somebody that knows maybe nothing about the Bible, maybe has no background, and that may be some of you today. I hope it is. I hope that there are some of you with us today that say, I don't know much about this whole church world, the Bible world, etc. How might you understand this? I think there's an important insight that this book is giving us, and I would say it like this. Running away from God is never spatial. It is always relational. Running away from God is never spatial. In other words, it's never about the geography of the distance that you make. Now, people do this a lot. I've talked to people that have had a horrible experience in church life, and so they run from it the way I run from the glaucoma test, or the dentist, the way you run from things that you don't want to commit to. You run as far as you can physically, because we're under the illusion, if I can get it out of sight, out of mind, it's out of my mind and out of my sight. And that really is rarely, if ever, the case. Running away from God is not about Tarshish or Joppa. It's a relational reality, because Jonah's going to find out very soon, right, that you can't win the geography race. One old writer said that God's center is everywhere. His circumference is nowhere. So when a person wants to run from God, it's a relational truth, right? This will sometimes happen in the breakdown of a marriage. I know this is a sensitive subject probably for many of you, right? And depending on your background, if you're divorced or remarried or separated, whatever you may have or currently even be going through, this is a reality for you. You can live in the same house, right? You can sleep in the same bed. You can eat at the same table. You can raise the same kids. You can drive the same car. But there can be a vast distance between that person that is right there. What Jonah is going to learn, and what we learn, is that we often run from God, and it's silly when we try to get away from the church, we try to get away from the people, we think we've accomplished something, and all that's really happened is we have just run really closer, or as close as we were, geographically, particularly to God, but relationally, there is a great distance. That's the issue in the book of Jonah. I think if we miss this in chapter 1, by the time we get to chapter 4, which we'll get to on March 3rd, this book will make no sense. I want to park on that. Running away from God is always a relational issue, never a spatial one. And we see that as the story unfolds. Let's go back to Jonah. Love that. I wanted to highlight it for you. But the Lord. But God. That's been noted before. Probably the most foundational words maybe in the Bible that you can put together. But God, but the Lord. We have plans, right? We try to rule over our affairs, and God overrules what we try to do. So I want you to notice how many times in this book, but God, but the Lord, he enters the scene. Hurled a great wind upon the sea, and there was a mighty tempest, mighty storm on the sea, so that the ship threaten to break up. And now, in this next sentence, notice how the cluelessness of Jonah seems to be on display for us. Then the mariners, so these sailors, now we're going to find out, who don't know the God of Israel. And tuck that away in your mind. They're terrified. And if you've ever been out on the Chesapeake Bay during a storm, I was one time. And man, I had just fantasies and dreams about sitting on a chair in my kitchen, that all of a sudden it was the most wonderful place in the world, right? I mean, if you told me you'll never go to an exotic destination the rest of your life, if I can sit on the chair in my kitchen, that's the best place ever when you've ever been out on the violent, turbulent, tumultuous water. They're terrified. And each cried out to his God. But Jonah had gone down into the inner part of the ship and had laid down and was, I love this, fast asleep. I mean, it's as if the reader is invited in, man, Jonah. These poor dudes were just going to work one day, right? And then this guy shows up, and they have no idea yet. They're about to find out he has brought with him a world of trouble, which is what people do when they run away from God. They still bring themselves and all their defects and all their problems along with them. And here this is illustrated in a very, very powerful way. Notice now the captain of these sailors enters into the picture. So the captain came and said to him, "What do you mean, you sleeper?" I love this. "Arise and call out to your God. Perhaps the God will give a thought to us so that we may not perish." Do you see what's going on here? All these guys are calling out to their gods, and it's likely to believe that these are just kind of for hire sailors. Many of them probably had different gods based on the locales and geographical regions from which they hailed, and they've been calling out their gods, and ain't nothing happening. The sea is still tumultuous. So he's waking him up. At the moment, he doesn't seem to be aware that Jonah may have brought the problem with him, but he says to Jonah, "Wake up, and it's your time to call on your God." Maybe he's the lucky card, because we're starting to exhaust all options. That phrase, "perhaps the God will give a thought to us," is very, very significant. Let's see how it continues. "And they said to one another, 'Come, let us cast lots, that we may know on whose account this evil has come upon us.'" And I just have to wonder, what was Jonah feeling at this point? Hey, maybe these guys don't know how to cast lots. I don't know. So they cast lots, and the lot fell to Jonah. Now, in the ancient world, we don't know. The writer doesn't tell us exactly how this happened. That could have been stones, right? So say you have, 10 sailors, 11 with Jonah, and you have 11 stones. One of them is a different color. That was one way. Sometimes it's like the old short straw, right? We don't know how they cast lots, but it's the equivalent of rolling the dice and seeing where it lands, right? What number are you? Okay, you got the 2 dice. I'm number 10, and 2 5s roll up. Whatever the picture is, we see that the lot fell on Jonah. That is significant. Notice how they react. Then they said to him, "Tell us on whose account this evil has come upon us. What is your occupation?" Notice these questions. The inquiry sets in there. He's under the 3rd degree light. "Where do you come from? What is your country? And of what people are you?" So Jonah had a very short respite where he was taking his nap and was clueless about the terrible consequences he had brought with him. And now the truth has been exposed, and we have to marvel at this quote-unquote bad luck that Jonah's got. What are the odds that the lot would fall to him? I mean, he had a 1 out of 12 chance that might happen, right? So we are reminded here subtly, or maybe not so subtly, that God is all-powerful. The old word is sovereign. We don't hear that as much anymore, except with nations, right? Sometimes there'd be a dispute in an international body of water, right? And somebody says, no, this happened here in our sovereign waters. It's my realm in which I have all authority to rule. And what we learn is that the realm of God, where he has all authority to rule, is everywhere. In Joppa, in Nineveh, in Tarshish, and on the open sea. God is all sovereign. As the Proverbs tell us, the lot is cast into the lap, but it's every decision is from the Lord. Wow. I don't know how that sits with all of us this morning. Someone once said that if we understand this properly, it means that there is no maverick molecule in the universe. This is the extent to which God's power and his right to do what he wants, when he wants, with whom he wants, wherever he wants. This is where it extends to that minuscule detail, even the roll of the dice. This is where God can show up and rule. We think things befall us accidentally, randomly. Why me? Why me? Often missing that if there is a purpose behind all of our circumstances, it means there is a God of purpose behind all those circumstances. And he is the one and the only one that can guide us through and out of them, or to sometimes endure them. So here is the lot. It's fallen to Jonah. Back to our story. And it's confession time for Jonah. And he said to them, I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven. And here's a rare description of God found in the Old Testament scriptures. The God of heaven who made the sea and the dry land. Do you see how carefully he selected that description of God and who he is? Normally the phrase is the God who made the heavens and the earth, almost without exception. But here, it's the God who made the sea and the dry land. Why does he say that? Because it immediately arrests the sailor's attention. What do you want when you're in the middle of the tumultuous sea? You want the dry land. And my God made this water, and he made that land. So we see here Jonah is a truth teller. He's a message giver. He's giving it. These aren't the circumstances he intended to give it. In fact, he didn't intend to give a message at all, but here God has him. I'm going to say something radical. It's almost like God planned this. It's incredible. I mean, I don't want to be too radical, but maybe I submit that for your consideration. Let's see how the story continues. Then the men were exceedingly afraid and said to him, what is this that you have done? For the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord because he had told them. So again, it's full disclosure. Hey guys, here's what happened. My God told me to go to Nineveh, and I said no. So I came here, and I brought my consequences with me, and they're now affecting you. So notice how they respond. Then they said to him, what shall we do to you that the sea may quiet down for us? For the sea grew more and more, I love that word, tempestuous. I've tried to drop that on my kids when they're unruly. You guys are growing more and more tempestuous. And they look at me and go back to their Nintendo Switch. But I feel like I've said something really cool. The sea is intensifying. And they're asking the question, what do we do? And notice Jonah, he doesn't hesitate in his response. He said to them, pick me up, hurl me into the sea. Then the sea will quiet down for you, for I know it is because of me that this great storm, this great tempest has come upon you. It's time to pay up. Jonah knows he can't let his own disobedience ruin the lives of all these innocent men. And so he's ready to be cast into the sea. Now, what I love about this, a lot of times people think, and I used to think this before I became a Christian, when I was outside of the Christian faith, I tended to think that religious people, and maybe it's true with religious people, or maybe the religious community or the Bible that they read just doesn't like me, one-dimensionalizes me, considers me just a terrible, terrible person. And you get these little clues in this. None of these sailors are believers in the God of Israel, but notice their noble nature. Nevertheless, the men rowed hard to get back to dry land. They are not monsters. Jonah just said, hey, throw me in the drink, dudes, and your problems will go away. But let's keep trying. They row hard. I love that little picture, right? God looks upon them. He sees that they don't know him, but there's also a favorable comment about their heart. There are many, many people that are outside of the faith, and they have a nobility. They're created in the image of God. They are portrayed here very honestly. We're going to see that they need the Lord greatly, But I just find that an interesting detail. Their plan doesn't work. Next verse. Therefore, they called out to the Lord. Notice that. It's capital here. This is the Lord. This is Yahweh. If you could read the original language, that you would see. They were calling to their pagan gods, and now they're calling to the Lord. Oh, Lord, let us not perish for this man's life, and lay not on us innocent blood. For you, O Lord, have done as it pleased you. Wow. Yes, they have had a radical change. Their hearts have changed. God will often do this in the midst of the most adverse circumstances. They understand he's real, he's present, and he's on the move. And they turn to him. So they picked up Jonah and hurled him into the sea. And the sea ceased from its raging. I mean, now notice the next verse. Then the men feared the Lord. Wouldn't you think they might sell? Yeah! We cut out the malignancy. Let's have a party, guys. No. The writer wants us to see they had a certain kind of fear. And now they have the fear that'll change your whole life and redirect the whole trajectory of your days, one after another, in this life, in the next. They now fear the Lord, because when you see the power he has, that will arrest your attention. And they feared the Lord exceedingly, and now they offer a sacrifice to the Lord. They've just met him in the most unusual of circumstances. And then, this is what we know about Jonah. The Lord appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. That'll be next week's message. I'm good. Cheryl, thank you so much. That's next week's message. Cheryl wants me to keep going, and I'll do it. If you go back, tell the nursery workers. Because I'm telling you, there's nobody in our church that scares me more than the nursery workers. They're the sweetest, most wonderful people, but I can feel it when I walk out, and I'm like, hey, how you doing? And I see that stink eye. It's scary. But we're going to get to this next week. I'm going to call that message, by the way, Faith in a Fish. You got to think about that for a minute. Because Jonah's going to write a little psalm inside of this sea creature. And you think, what? Did that happen? And we'll get all that next week. And why people think it's a parable. What I want us to see right now is, do you see the portrayal of God in this book? He is relentless. He wants to reach lost people. He wants to use us to reach them. And he is so determined, he's so tunnel vision, he will do whatever is necessary, right? I think we might have sung that this morning, right? Climb every mountain, kick in every door. He's God unstoppable. And if you look back at your life and know when you came to faith in Christ, if you have put your faith in him, there was a whole story that happened. And I tend to think we don't even know the story, and we won't know it till we get to heaven one day and say, oh, I didn't know you did that. 5 years before I was even born, you arranged this and that. He's unstoppable. And even when we deviate, he will find a way to course correct and pursue us, because he loves lost people. He loved these sailors. God said, Jonah, I'm even going to use your disobedient desertion to do something that nobody could ever expect. What an awesome God we worship and serve. Father, thank you for this wonderful truth. Thank you that you are unstoppable. You are relentless. The effect of your love, Lord, in your pursuit, the effect, it comes across to us, Lord, as reckless, knocking down every obstacle, because you must have those people that you are pursuing. Thank you, Lord, that many of us this morning would lift our hands and say, I am one of them. He pursued me. I, like Jonah, would run. I, like the Ninevites, the cry of my need and desperation rose to you, and Lord, you did not reject, but you pursued. would you help us, Father, see you in this life? Would you give us the same heart you have for those outside of the faith, that we might want to be used by you to be the messengers? Let me tell you about a God who rules the sea and the dry land, who orders everything, and he wants to bring us into his family. We thank you and praise you for that love. In Jesus' name.